Someone wronged you. Maybe they betrayed your trust. Maybe they humiliated you in front of others. Maybe they took credit for your work, spread lies about your character, or destroyed something you spent years building. And now there's a fire burning inside you, a relentless voice whispering, they can't get away with this. They need to pay. They need to suffer the way you've suffered. You've imagined the confrontation 1,000 times, rehearsed the perfect cutting words, fantasized about the moment they realize what they've lost, what they've destroyed, who they've underestimated. But here's what's actually happening. While you're consumed by these thoughts, you're destroying yourself. You're handing your peace, your power, and your future to the person who hurt you. You're letting them live rent-free in your mind, while you pay the price in sleepless nights, poisoned thoughts, and stolen joy. The Stoics understood revenge differently than anyone else in history. Marcus Aurelius, who had more power to punish his enemies than almost anyone who ever lived, wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." Today, we're going to explore why your desire for revenge is natural, why acting on it destroys you, and what true Stoic revenge looks like. A form of response so powerful, so complete, that it transforms you while rendering your enemy irrelevant. This isn't about being weak. This isn't about letting people walk over you. This is about something far more devastating than anything you could do to hurt them back. Right now, in this moment, someone in your life has hurt you and faces no consequences. They're sleeping fine. They're moving forward with their life. Meanwhile, you're replaying what happened over and over. Your blood pressure rising, your stomach churning, your mind spinning with scenarios of retribution. This is the revenge paradox. The person you want to punish isn't being punished. You are. Look at how this plays out in daily life. You're trying to focus at work, but suddenly the memory surfaces. What they said, what they did. Your productivity evaporates as you spend 20 minutes mentally arguing with someone who isn't even there. They've stolen another piece of your day without even trying. You're with friends or family, supposedly enjoying yourself, but you can't be fully present. Part of your mind is still back there, still wounded, still plotting. The people you love are getting a diminished version of you, and the person who hurt you doesn't even know or care. You make decisions based on spite. You choose paths not because they serve your goals, but because they're the opposite of what your enemy would want. You're not living your life. You're living a reaction to theirs. Your habits deteriorate. You drink more to numb the anger. You sleep less because your mind won't stop churning. You snap at people who had nothing to do with what happened. The injury spreads like poison, affecting every area of your life. And here's the cruelest part. While you're consumed by thoughts of revenge, the person who hurt you has probably moved on. They're not thinking about you. They're not losing sleep. They've caused their damage and walked away, while you remain trapped in that moment of injury, replaying it endlessly. The Stoics identified this as one of the most destructive patterns of human behavior, allowing others' wrongdoing to corrupt your own character, not because it's morally wrong to feel anger, but because it's utterly irrational to destroy yourself in response to someone else's actions. This matters because your life is finite. Every hour you spend consumed by revenge is an hour stolen from building something meaningful. Every ounce of energy devoted to hatred is energy not directed toward your own flourishing. The question isn't whether you were wronged. The question is, what are you going to do about it, in a way that doesn't make you another casualty of their damage? Let's travel back to ancient Rome, to a man who had every reason to seek revenge and every power to achieve it. Marcus Aurelius became emperor of Rome at age 40. He inherited an empire facing plague, war, economic crisis, and political treachery. People around him constantly schemed, betrayed, and worked against him. His own trusted general, Avidius Cassius, declared himself emperor and attempted a coup. Marcus had absolute power. He could have tortured his enemies, executed their families, destroyed everyone who opposed him. The Roman world expected this. It was standard practice. But when Cassius was killed by his own soldiers and the rebellion collapsed, Marcus did something shocking. He pardoned everyone involved. He burned the treasonous letters without reading them, saying he didn't want to know who had betrayed him. He refused to punish the families. He refused to gloat or celebrate. Why? In his private journal, Meditations, he wrote, "How much more grievous are the consequences of anger than the causes of it." He understood something profound. Revenge wouldn't undo the betrayal. It wouldn't make him safer. It would only corrupt him, make him more like the people he despised. Then there's Epictetus, who was born a slave. He was literally owned by another human being. His master broke his leg. Some accounts say deliberately, others say through negligence. Epictetus was permanently lamed by someone who had absolute power over him. When he gained his freedom and became a philosopher, did he spend his teaching time raging against the injustice of slavery, plotting revenge against those who had wronged him? No. He taught the person who has injured you is your teacher. They provide you the opportunity to practice patience, forgiveness, and strength of character. This wasn't weakness. This was a man who had suffered real, permanent physical injury, choosing not to let that injury define his philosophy or his life. And Seneca, advisor to Emperor Nero, one of history's most volatile and dangerous rulers. Seneca watched Nero execute innocent people on whims. He saw corruption, cruelty, and injustice daily. Eventually, Nero turned on Seneca himself, forcing him to commit suicide. Yet even facing death by the very person he had served, Seneca maintained his composure. He spent his final hours comforting his friends, discussing philosophy, and maintaining his dignity. In his earlier writings, he addressed revenge directly. The greatest remedy for anger is delay. Beg anger to grant you this at the first, not in order that it may pardon the offense, but that it may form a right judgment about it. What united these three men, emperor, slave, statesman, was their recognition that revenge is a transaction where you pay the higher price. The ancient Stoics developed their philosophy in a brutal world. Rome was violent, political life was treacherous, and injustice was common. They weren't naive idealists sheltered from harm. They were practical people dealing with real betrayals, real enemies, real consequences. Their approach to revenge emerged from direct observation. They watched people destroy themselves through hatred. They saw how the desire for vengeance corrupted character, consumed energy, and ultimately made people become what they hated. They understood that when someone wrongs you, they've already taken something. The question is, will you let them take everything else too? Here's what's going to flip your entire understanding of revenge. The person who hurt you wants you to stay angry, not consciously perhaps, but your continued suffering validates their narrative. Your rage proves they had power over you. Your inability to move forward confirms their significance in your life. Every moment you spend plotting revenge, you're giving them exactly what they took from you: your peace, your presence, your power. They've already won, unless you change the game entirely. The Stoics discovered something that modern psychology has now confirmed. The opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. And the opposite of being hurt isn't hurting back. It's becoming so strong, so whole, so focused on your own excellence, that the injury becomes irrelevant. That's true revenge. Not causing them pain, but making their opinion, their actions, their very existence completely meaningless to your flourishing. Let's examine the psychology of why revenge feels so compelling, and why it actually destroys you. Your brain has an ancient justice mechanism. When you're wronged, your mind immediately calculates, this isn't fair. The scales are unbalanced. Equilibrium must be restored. This mechanism evolved for tribal survival. In a small community where reputation mattered for survival, allowing wrongs to go unpunished could signal weakness, and invite further exploitation. But here's what your ancient brain doesn't understand. The modern world operates differently. Revenge rarely restores anything. It usually creates escalating cycles of retaliation that leave everyone worse off. When someone wrongs you, your amygdala, the emotional center of your brain, activates. Stress hormones flood your system. Your body prepares for conflict. This is automatic, not a choice. The Stoics didn't deny this reaction. Epictetus taught clearly first impressions are involuntary. What happens next is up to you. You can't control the flash of anger when you're wronged. But what you do next, that's where your power lies. Most people, in that moment of anger, make a critical error. They act immediately. They fire off the email. They have the confrontation. They spread the counter-rumors. They do something, anything, to discharge the uncomfortable energy of rage. And in doing so, they hand control to their most primitive brain systems. Here's what revenge actually does to you physiologically. When you rehearse revenge fantasies, your body cannot distinguish between imagination and reality. Your heart rate increases. Your cortisol spikes. Your nervous system shifts into threat mode. You're literally poisoning yourself with stress hormones, while the person who wronged you feels nothing. Researchers have studied this. People who ruminate on revenge show elevated inflammatory markers, higher blood pressure, disrupted sleep, and increased risk of cardiovascular disease. The body keeps the score, and the score says you're under constant attack. But it gets worse. Revenge fantasies are addictive. Each time you imagine the perfect comeback, the moment they realize what they've lost, the scenario where they beg for forgiveness, your brain releases a small hit of dopamine. It feels good, briefly. So you do it again and again. You're training your brain to seek that temporary relief, creating a neural pathway that leads nowhere except deeper into the obsession. The Stoics understood this pattern. Marcus Aurelius wrote how much time he gains, who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does, or thinks, but only at what he does himself, to make it just and holy. He's pointing to the fundamental choice: where do you direct your attention? Every moment spent focused on your enemy's actions is a moment stolen from your own development. You're literally trading your potential for their irrelevance. Let's look at this practically. Imagine you've been betrayed by a business partner. They took your idea, cut you out, and succeeded with something you helped create. The injustice burns. Scenario 1. You spend the next year trying to destroy their business. You spread information about their character. You try to steal their clients. You badmouth them to everyone in your industry. What happens? Best case, you damage them somewhat. But in the process, you've spent a year focused on destruction rather than creation. You've made yourself known as vindictive, which damages your own reputation. You've trained your mind to focus on tearing down rather than building up. Worst case, your revenge attempts fail or backfire, leaving you even more bitter and powerless. Either way, you've given them a year of your life, a year you could have spent building something even better. Scenario 2. You feel the anger fully. You acknowledge the injustice. Then you make a different choice. You channel that energy into building something greater than what was stolen. You focus on your own excellence with such intensity that within a year, you've created something that makes the original idea look trivial. In this scenario, you haven't just moved on, you've moved up. And that's devastating in a way revenge never could be. The Stoics called this turning the obstacle into the way. The injury becomes fuel. The betrayal becomes motivation, not for revenge, but for your own transcendence. Here's another critical insight about revenge. It chains you to the past. Every act of revenge is an attempt to change what already happened. But the past cannot be changed. What's done is done. Revenge is an irrational attempt to undo the undoable. When you orient your life around revenge, you're stuck in a moment that no longer exists. You can't build a future because you're constantly trying to fix the past. Seneca wrote, Life is long if you know how to use it, but you cannot use your life effectively if you're perpetually looking backward, measuring everything against an old wound. This is why people who achieve revenge often feel hollow afterward. They imagine that the moment of retribution would bring relief, closure, satisfaction. But when it comes, they discover the wound remains. The past still happened. Nothing fundamental has changed, except they've now added their own cruelty to the world's total. The Stoics weren't advocating passivity or acceptance of injustice. They were advocating something far more radical: complete focus on what you can actually control, your own character, choices, and development. Marcus Aurelius had people executed when necessary for the safety of the empire, but he did it as a practical matter, without hatred or pleasure. He wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like that." That line contains the entire Stoic philosophy of revenge. Don't become what you hate. Don't let their actions determine your character. Don't give them the power to corrupt you. Stop reading for a moment and ask yourself this uncomfortable question: but who is winning right now? You or the person who hurt you? If they're living their life, moving forward, building, creating, while you're stuck in mental loops of rage and revenge fantasies, they're still winning. If you've changed your behavior, limited your joy, or compromised your values because of what they did, they're still controlling you. If months or years have passed, and you're still giving them free rent in your mind, they own you. Here's the brutal truth you need to hear. Your enemy doesn't need to do anything else to hurt you. You're doing it to yourself now, and you'll keep doing it until you make a different choice. The Stoics would ask, is this rational? Is devoting your precious finite life energy to someone who wronged you a wise use of your existence? Or is it the most profound victory they could possibly achieve over you, making you abandon your own flourishing in service of hating them? Let's go deeper into why revenge fails and what it costs you over time. When you hold on to the desire for revenge, you're not holding one isolated thought. You're maintaining an entire ecosystem of destructive patterns. First, you develop selective attention. Your mind becomes a heat-seeking missile for anything that confirms your narrative about how terrible this person is. You notice every flaw, every misstep, every bit of gossip or failure. This feels like vigilance, like you're staying informed about your enemy. But what's actually happening is that you're training your brain to focus on negativity, and your brain doesn't compartmentalize well. The pattern of seeking out what's wrong spreads to other areas of your life. You start noticing what's wrong with your job, your relationships, your circumstances. The lens through which you view your enemy becomes the lens through which you view everything. The Stoics understood this. Epictetus taught that we become what we practice. If you practice looking for wrongs to avenge, you become someone who sees everything through the lens of grievance. Second, you create an identity around the wound. At first, you're simply someone who was wronged. But over time, if you don't release it, the wound becomes central to your identity. You become the person who was betrayed, the one who was cheated, the victim of that injustice. And once it's part of your identity, letting it go becomes terrifying. If you're not the wronged party anymore, who are you? If you forgive or move on, does that mean it didn't matter? That you didn't matter? So you hold on to it, even as it poisons you, because it's become the story you tell yourself about yourself. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, "Today I escaped from anxiety," or no, I discarded it, because it was within me, in my own perceptions, not outside. He's making a crucial distinction. The injury happened outside you, but the continued suffering is happening inside you, by your own choice. Third, revenge thinking creates a fixed mindset about human nature. When you're consumed by revenge, you develop a black and white view: good people and bad people, victims and villains, the righteous and the wicked. This seems justified in the moment. After all, they did something clearly wrong. But this binary thinking has consequences. You lose the ability to see nuance in human behavior. You forget that people are complex, capable of both good and terrible actions. You forget that you too have hurt people, Perhaps not in the same way, but hurt nonetheless. This rigid thinking makes you brittle. It prevents growth, because growth requires seeing yourself and others as capable of change. The Stoics were adamant about this. They believed that wrongdoing comes from ignorance, not evil. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Whenever you take offense at someone's wrongdoing, immediately turn to your own similar failings." He's not equating all wrongs as equal. He's reminding himself that everyone, including him, acts from incomplete understanding. This doesn't excuse the behavior, but it removes the personal sting. Fourth, revenge corrupts your decision-making across all domains. When you're driven by revenge, you make choices based on opposition rather than aspiration. You define yourself by what you're against, rather than what you're for. This might look like choosing a career path because it's different from what your enemy would respect, staying in situations that don't serve you, just to prove you can endure, rejecting opportunities because they might indirectly benefit someone you hate, sacrificing your own values to prove a point. You're not living your life. You're living a rebuttal to someone else's. Seneca observed this in Roman politics constantly. He watched people make catastrophic decisions purely to spite their rivals. Senators would vote against their own interests if it meant frustrating an enemy. Generals would pursue foolish military campaigns to outdo competitors. The tragedy is that these revenge-driven choices often accomplish nothing except the decision-maker's own downfall. Fifth, the desire for revenge prevents you from learning the lesson. Every difficult experience, including betrayal or injury, contains information. There's usually something to learn about who to trust, about warning signs you missed, about your own vulnerabilities or patterns. But when you're consumed by revenge, you can't access those lessons. You're too busy rehearsing what you'll say or do to the person who hurt you. The Stoics saw difficulties as teachers. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This is only possible if you shift from "how do I hurt them back" to "what can I learn from this? How can this make me stronger?" Let's examine a specific case study in how revenge destroys over time. Imagine someone was passed over for a promotion they deserved. Their colleague, who took credit for their work, got the position instead. This is genuinely unfair. Year 1. They're angry but still functional. They fantasize about exposing the fraud, about the colleague failing spectacularly. They do good work, partly driven by spite. Year 2. The anger has become background noise. They make comments about the colleague at every opportunity. They've stopped innovating in their own work because they're too focused on their colleagues' mistakes. They turn down opportunities at other companies because they want to be there when justice finally arrives. Year 5. They're known as bitter. People avoid assigning them to projects with the colleague, which limits their own opportunities. Their performance reviews mention attitude issues. They've spent 5 years waiting for vindication that hasn't come. Year 10. They're still at the same company, still angry about something that happened a decade ago. The colleague has moved on, possibly to an even better position. Meanwhile, they've become a cautionary tale, a talented person who destroyed their own career through an inability to let go. This isn't hypothetical. This pattern plays out constantly in workplaces, families, and communities everywhere. The Stoics would see this person as imprisoned, not by their colleagues' actions, but by their own inability to redirect their focus. Here's the deepest insight. Revenge is attractive because it promises to restore what was taken, but it can't deliver. If someone stole your peace, taking theirs doesn't give you yours back. If someone damaged your reputation, damaging theirs doesn't restore yours. If someone betrayed your trust, betraying theirs doesn't make you able to trust again. Revenge operates on faulty logic, that harm plus harm equals healing. But harm plus harm only equals more harm. Seneca wrote, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." He understood that time and distance from the initial injury allow you to see this logical flaw. In the heat of the moment, revenge feels like restoration. With perspective, it reveals itself as destruction. So we understand the problem. The desire for revenge is natural but destructive. It poisons you while leaving your enemy untouched. It chains you to the past while preventing you from building a future. We've seen how this pattern develops, how it compounds, and how it ultimately serves your enemy's interests better than your own. Now the critical question: what's the alternative? This is where Stoicism becomes powerfully practical, because the Stoics didn't just tell you to let it go or move on, useless advice that ignores the depth of the wound. Instead, they provided a systematic approach to transforming injury into strength, betrayal into wisdom, and the desire for revenge into something far more powerful: indifference earned through excellence. The Stoic path isn't about suppressing your anger or pretending you weren't hurt. It's about channeling that energy into becoming someone for whom the injury no longer matters, not because you've forced yourself to forgive, but because you've grown beyond the reach of what wounded you. This is true revenge, not making them suffer, but making yourself immune to the suffering they caused. Let me show you how. Practice 1. The dichotomy of control applied to injury. The foundational Stoic practice is distinguishing between what you control and what you don't. Apply this specifically to your situation. What you don't control: that they hurt you, whether they feel remorse, whether others know the truth, whether they face consequences, their success or failure, their peace of mind. What you do control: how much mental space you give this, your character in response, your choices moving forward, who you become because of this, whether you let this define you. Take a piece of paper, draw a line down the middle. On the left, list everything about this situation you cannot control. On the right, everything you can. Look at the left column. All your suffering comes from focusing here, on things you cannot change. Look at the right column. This is where your power actually lives. The Stoic practice is simple but difficult. Every time you notice yourself thinking about the left column, deliberately redirect to the right column. Not why did they do this, uncontrollable, but who do I want to become in response? Controllable. Not how can I make them pay, uncontrollable outcome, but how can I build something so meaningful that this becomes irrelevant? Controllable action. Marcus Aurelius practiced this constantly. His journal is full of reminders to focus only on what's in his control, his own thoughts, judgments, and actions. Practice 2. The view from above. When you're trapped in the emotions of revenge, everything feels enormous, all-consuming, permanent. The Stoics practiced a technique they called seeing from above, deliberately zooming out to gain perspective. Set a timer for 10 minutes. Sit quietly and imagine your situation from across the room. You and the person who hurt you. Two humans with your individual dramas. From above your city, two people among millions, each dealing with their struggles. From above your country, two brief lives among hundreds of millions. From space, Earth spinning in infinite darkness. All human dramas playing out on this small rock, lasting for a cosmic eye blink. From 100 years in the future, both you and your enemy gone. Does this conflict matter to anyone? Will anyone even remember it? This isn't about minimizing your pain. It's about contextualizing it. The injury is real, but it's not reality itself. It's one event among billions, significant to you in this moment, but not objectively or permanently significant. Marcus Aurelius wrote Alexander the Great and his mule driver both died, and the same thing happened to both. He was reminding himself that all human dramas end the same way, in death and eventual forgetting. This made present conflicts less consuming. Practice 3. Recasting the narrative. Right now, you have a story about what happened. In this story, you're the victim and they're the villain. This story feels true because something genuinely unjust occurred. But the Stoics teach that we can reframe any event without denying its reality. Write out the current story. They betrayed me. They stole from me. They humiliated me. And now rewrite it from a Stoic perspective. This person, acting from their own confusion and limitations, did something that hurt me. This hurt revealed something about who to trust, about my own vulnerabilities, about what I value. This difficult teacher has given me an opportunity to practice resilience, to strengthen my character, to discover what I'm capable of. Both stories describe the same events, but one leaves you powerless and consumed. The other leaves you with agency and direction. Epictetus taught it's not what happens to you, but how you interpret it that matters. This isn't toxic positivity. You're not saying the injury was good. You're choosing which interpretation serves your flourishing. Practice 4. The daily evening review mortified for revenge. Seneca practiced reviewing his day each evening, examining his thoughts and actions. Adapt this specifically for processing revenge thoughts. Each evening, ask yourself, 1. How many times today did I think about the person who hurt me? 2. How much time did I spend on revenge fantasies versus building my own life? 3. Did I make any decisions today based on spite rather than my genuine values? 4. What would the person I'm becoming do differently tomorrow? Write brief answers. The practice isn't about self-judgment. It's about awareness. You're tracking the revenge thoughts like you'd track an expense you want to reduce. Over time, you'll notice patterns. Maybe revenge thoughts spike when you're tired or stressed. Maybe they're triggered by certain places or people. This awareness allows you to intervene earlier in the cycle. Practice 5. The premeditation of evils. Revenge edition. The Stoics regularly imagined worst-case scenarios to rob them of their power. Apply this to your revenge situation. Imagine the absolute worst outcome: your enemy succeeds beyond measure. They face no consequences. They never acknowledge what they did. They live happily while you remain hurt. Sit with this scenario. Feel it fully. Then ask, can I be okay even if this happens? Can I build a meaningful life even if they never pay for what they did? The answer, if you're honest, is yes. It would be difficult, unfair, frustrating, but you could survive it. You could even thrive. This exercise removes the revenge's power over you. You're no longer holding your happiness hostage to an outcome you can't control. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Nothing happens to anyone that they're not naturally equipped to endure." You can endure this. And once you know you can endure it, it loses its ability to control you. Practice 6. Active indifference building. You can't force yourself to stop caring about someone who hurt you, but you can deliberately build a life so full, so meaningful, so aligned with your values that they naturally become less relevant. This is strategic attention management. Where you direct your attention, energy flows. Where energy flows, life grows. Make a list of what you genuinely care about: relationships, projects, skills, contributions. Not reactions against your enemy, but authentic values. Then commit to daily action toward these values. Small actions, consistently repeated. Each day you spend building something meaningful is a day you're not consumed by revenge. Over time, the balance shifts. The injury becomes one event in a rich life rather than the central event around which everything else orbits. This is how you become unlike him who performed the injury, not through effort to forgive, but through effort to flourish. Practice 7. Transmuting anger into fuel. The energy of anger is real and powerful. The Stoic approach isn't to suppress it, but to redirect it. When you feel the anger rising, and you will, instead of channeling it toward revenge fantasies, channel it toward your own excellence. Angry about the betrayal, use that energy to work out harder than you have in months. Furious about the injustice, channel it into your creative work, your business, your craft. Burning with the desire for vindication, direct it toward becoming so excellent at what you do that vindication becomes unnecessary. The Stoics understood that emotions are energy in motion. You can't stop the energy, but you can direct where it moves. Seneca wrote, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." Delay the revenge action, but not the energetic response. Just redirect it toward construction instead of destruction. Practice 8. The gratitude inversion. This is the most difficult practice, but potentially the most powerful. Once you've processed the initial anger, once you've established some distance, ask yourself, what might I eventually be grateful for in this experience? Not grateful that it happened, but grateful for what it taught you, who it revealed people to be. what it forced you to develop in yourself. Maybe it taught you discernment. Maybe it showed you that you're stronger than you thought. Maybe it forced you toward a path that's ultimately better than the one you were on. This isn't about excusing their behavior. It's about reclaiming the experience for your own growth. Marcus Aurelius practiced this constantly. When faced with difficult people, he'd thank them for the opportunity to practice patience and virtue. You're not thanking the person who hurt you. You're thanking the universe for the opportunity to discover what you're made of. Practice 9. The public indifference test. Here's how you know the Stoic revenge is working. Someone mentions the person who hurt you, and you feel nothing. Not forced calm, not suppressed anger, but genuine indifference. Someone asks about the situation, and you can discuss it calmly, without the story having emotional charge. You hear they've succeeded or failed, and it doesn't affect your mood either way. This is the goal. Not forgiveness necessarily, not reconciliation, but complete irrelevance. They no longer occupy space in your emotional landscape. They're just another person who exists, whose existence has no bearing on your peace. That's the ultimate revenge, their complete inability to disturb your tranquility. Let me show you what this looks like when applied in real life. Modern example. The business betrayal. David spent 3 years building a startup with his co-founder. They were friends, partners, equals, or so he thought. Then his co-founder orchestrated a board coup, diluted David's shares, and pushed him out of the company he'd helped create. The initial reaction was predictable rage, betrayal, desire for revenge. David spent weeks consulting lawyers, planning countermoves, imagining the perfect moment to destroy what his former partner had stolen. Then he encountered Stoic philosophy. He started practicing the dichotomy of control. He realized he couldn't control what happened. He couldn't control whether his former partner faced consequences. He could only control his response. He made a decision. Instead of spending years in legal battles that would consume his energy and capital, he would build something better. He used the anger as fuel. Every time he felt the revenge thoughts creeping in, he redirected that energy into his new venture. He worked with an intensity he'd never accessed before, not to prove something to his former partner, but to prove something to himself. 3 years later, his new company was more successful than the one he'd been pushed out of. His former partner reached out, attempting to reconnect. David responded politely but briefly. He felt nothing, no triumph, no anger, no need to rub his success in anyone's face. That indifference was his revenge. His former partner's actions had become completely irrelevant to his flourishing. Historical example: Nelson Mandela. Mandela spent 27 years in prison, brutalized by a system designed to break him. He had every reason to emerge consumed by revenge, to spend his freedom making his oppressors suffer. Instead, he emerged preaching reconciliation, not because he was soft or had forgotten the injustice, but because he understood that revenge would destroy the future he was trying to build. In his autobiography, he wrote, "Resentment is like drinking poison and then hoping it will kill your enemies." Pure Stoicism, even if he didn't frame it that way. He chose to channel his energy into building a new South Africa rather than punishing the old one. This wasn't weakness. It was the most powerful response imaginable. He robbed his oppressors of the satisfaction of having broken him. His revenge was becoming the person they'd tried to prevent him from being. Hypothetical transformation. The personal betrayal. Imagine Sarah, whose closest friend slept with her partner, destroying both relationships simultaneously. The double betrayal is devastating. Month 1. She's consumed by revenge fantasies. She imagines exposing them publicly, ruining their relationship, making them feel the pain they caused her. Month 2. She discovers Stoicism. She begins the practices dichotomy of control, evening review, perspective taking. The revenge thoughts don't disappear. but she starts catching them earlier. Month 3, she realizes she's spending 4 hours a day thinking about people who betrayed her. She decides that's 4 hours they don't deserve. She starts redirecting that time and energy into therapy, into reconnecting with other friends, into a creative project she'd abandoned. Month 6. She still has bad days, but they're getting rarer. She's built a life that doesn't revolve around the wound. She's dated new people. She's deepened other friendships. She's created art that processes the pain without being consumed by it. Year 1. She runs into them at a party. She feels her stomach clench. The wound isn't completely healed, but she realizes she doesn't need it to be. She can feel residual hurt without being destroyed by it. She's polite, brief, and moves on. She didn't get revenge in the traditional sense. They never apologized. They never faced consequences. But she got something better. She got her life back. She became someone who could endure betrayal and still build something beautiful. That's the Stoic revenge. Not making them suffer, but refusing to let their actions limit your potential. The pattern in all these examples. Notice what they all have in common. 1. They felt the anger fully without suppressing it. 2. They acknowledged the genuine injustice. 3. They chose to redirect energy toward building rather than destroying. 4. They measured success by their own growth, not their enemy's downfall. 5. They achieved indifference through excellence, not through forced forgiveness. This is the pattern. This is how Stoic revenge works in practice. Here's the final truth about revenge that might change everything. The person who hurt you is not your enemy. Your enemy is the person you become if you let their actions corrupt your character. Every moment you spend consumed by revenge, you're moving closer to becoming like them. Vindictive, destructive, controlled by emotion rather than reason. Every moment you spend building yourself, improving your character, and focusing on your own excellence, you're moving further away from their influence. Marcus Aurelius understood this completely when he wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." Think about what that actually means. Not get revenge by being better, though that might be a byproduct. But don't let their actions determine who you become. They've taken something from you already. Trust, peace, time, energy, perhaps something material. The question is, will you let them take your character too? Will you let them turn you into someone bitter, obsessed, stuck in the past? Or will you use this experience as raw material for becoming someone stronger, wiser, more resilient? The injury already happened. You can't change that. But what happens next is entirely up to you. You can spend years, even decades, trying to make them pay. And in doing so, you'll pay a price they never will. The price of a life unlived, potential unrealized, peace surrendered. Or you can make a different choice. You can decide that the best use of your one precious life isn't destroying someone else, but building yourself into someone extraordinary. Not for them, not to prove something to them, for you. Because here's what the Stoics knew that we forget. Your life isn't about them. It never was. They're just one person among billions who crossed your path and made a choice. That choice hurt you, yes, but it doesn't define you unless you let it. The ultimate revenge isn't making them regret what they did. Most people who hurt others are too self-absorbed to experience meaningful regret anyway. The ultimate revenge is building a life so rich, so meaningful, so aligned with your deepest values, that when you look back on this injury, you feel nothing but gratitude for who it forced you to become. Seneca once wrote to his friend, "Life, if well lived, is long enough. But you cannot live life well if you're constantly looking backward at who wronged you. You cannot build anything meaningful if your hands are full of stones to throw. You cannot become who you're meant to be if you're stuck being who they made you in a moment of pain. The Stoic path isn't easy. It's far easier to plot revenge than to build excellence. It's far more satisfying in the short term to imagine their downfall than to engineer your rise. But easy and satisfying aren't the same as wise. You have a choice to make, not once, but repeatedly, daily, moment by moment. When the revenge thoughts come, and they will you feed them or starve them? When the anger rises, and it will you channel it toward destruction or construction? When you think about this person, and you will you give them power over your peace? Or will you reclaim that power for yourself? The Stoics faced real enemies, real betrayals, real injustices. They lived in a brutal world where revenge was not only accepted, but expected. Yet they chose differently, not because they were weak, but because they were wise. They understood that the person who controls their response to injury is more powerful than the person who inflicted it. They knew that becoming excellent in spite of betrayal is more devastating than any revenge you could engineer. They recognized that a life well lived is the ultimate response to those who tried to destroy you. Marcus Aurelius, at the height of his power, could have destroyed anyone who opposed him. Instead, he destroyed the power of opposition itself by refusing to let it disturb his tranquility. That's available to you too. Not the political power of an emperor, but something far more valuable: sovereignty over your own mind, your own reactions, your own life. The person who hurt you has already taken enough. Don't give them another day, another hour, another moment. Take that energy, all that burning righteous anger, and build something with it. Build yourself into someone they could never diminish. Build a life they can't touch. Build a character they can't corrupt. That's revenge. Not petty, not destructive, not consuming, but complete, final, devastating. Because when you reach the point where their existence simply doesn't matter to your peace, when you've become so strong, so whole, so focused on your own excellence, that they're just background noise, you've won in the only way that matters. Not by making them suffer, but by making yourself immune to the suffering they caused. That's the Stoic way. That's true revenge. That's freedom.